So we have this video here, and it's from Project Veritas, and I don't know who this guy is. It says, busted, Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla relies on aggressive security tactics to escape Veritas journalists' questions. Do you know who this guy is? I'm not trying to be a dick to him. I don't know who he is.
Was his name Albert?
This guy right here, this journalist that they have.
Not yet.
So people started telling me, hey, they removed James O'Keefe, stripped him of his authority, put him on paid leave, have explained almost nothing. We had to get leaked this letter explaining what people were claiming, which sounds outlandish, and we've not gotten a response from James. Then they put out a video with some other dude I don't know at the very least.
James Lalino, Project Veritas reporter, standing outside the Conrad Hotel in Washington, D.C.
I just got to say this, doesn't it, I tweeted this morning that all the drama was part of a plan because I was joking, and it was, people took me seriously. I was like, Steven Crowder on the Daily Wire, and me in the Quartering, and Veritas and James O'Keefe. You don't think there's a coincidence, do you? Phase 2 begins soon. And then people thought I was being serious. I was just pointing out why is all of this stuff happening right now? Yeah. And then, of course, later in the day, I put out an apology to Jeremy because I don't think any of us have any differences in the level of what our real cultural and ideological battles are in the culture war and with politics. There's no real reason for me to be personally mad at Jeremy or anything like that, bickering like this. And I'll say that for me, I have no reason to even bring it up.
Sure, if he was trying to put microchips in you and track your movement, then I'd say you speak up.
Or, sterilize kids and things like that.
Central planning.
That's why I'm watching the Veritas stuff, watching the Crowder stuff, and all of this happening in the past couple of weeks. And then these other stories about people these Republicans getting shot. I'm kind of hey, yo, let's not. I don't know, man. Look, y'all can tell me I'm wrong about everything. You can insult me. You can say, Tim, you did bad. I will accept all of that. I don't want this to fall apart. I will gladly accept. You can unsubscribe. You can unfollow. You can not be a member anymore. I will gladly step back and say the worst possible thing right now with all of this going on is infighting. And I'm sorry. I don't want this to happen. I don't want things to get worse. This freaks me out.
So I'm sure there's multiple levels of drama, but as far as the right having this civil war, I'm actually extremely glad it's happening. I think Jose might agree with me because it seems to be separating the wheat from the chaff in a lot of ways, this whole DeSantis versus Trump stuff that's going on, and just seeing everyone turn on each other, seeing Matt Gaetz actually stand up against McCarthy being elected speaker, stuff like that. It's uncomfortable, but it's actually kind of forcing the right to evolve, if you know what I mean.
It is, but the reason I think Matt Gaetz is fantastic. I said this on the show the other day, and he brought it up that he's my favorite member of Congress, and I'm like, well, look, man, he defended Ilhan Omar, someone he shouldn't, on a principled ground that made sense, and I respect that. And then he voted to have her removed on a logical ground that made sense, and I'm like, I get what he's doing. He said he gives Speaker McCarthy an A rating now. They stood up. They did what they had to do. They stood up on principle. When it came to Swalwell and Schiff being removed from their committees, he said that makes sense. They lied about intelligence. I agree. He said removing Ilhan Omar because she said things you don't like doesn't seem to make sense. It doesn't sit well with me. However, Ilhan Omar voted to remove Marjorie Taylor Greene and Gosar, so that's the standard she set. So I'm like, that's actually logical. That makes sense. I can respect that tremendously. So when looking at the McCarthy stuff, that I'm in favor of. Them standing up to the establishment saying we get these concessions, but I don't see any net gain in all of us at the base level fighting with each other at all. I don't see any of us succeeding if all of us on the exact same time we all find reason to have beef with each other. You know what I mean?
It helps you identify good faith actors, in my opinion.
Yeah.
That's really, I know it splits things up, and to me, I see crises and stuff like this almost inevitable. I think you're almost better to make the best of it. And what this was you're able to identify things. From here, you're able to see who your in-group was, who your out-group was, who's willing to act in good faith, who's not. I mean, that's not to say there are perfect actors on the other side, but you can tell, throughout all this drama, there's been so many crazy claims, and it allows you to be like, yeah, I probably won't work with that person, probably not going to interact with them, et cetera, et cetera. You don't have to cause a problem over it, but it allows you to be able to see the battlefield, what's going on, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, this is the challenge that I basically see with all of this stuff is, this should not be happening at Veritas at all. If they've got problems with James O'Keefe, they should not have handled this way. This is horrible mismanagement. Made me take stock of what I was doing, and I'm like, I shouldn't be so reckless and brash and arrogant at the same, because like I see that and then it reflects on me. What am I doing? This is a bad way to handle it, especially if we're trying to be strategic and tactful, so that we can focus on issues like, I don't know, people smuggling eggs over the Mexican border because the prices are so insane. Like things we actually have to accomplish because we're concerned that they're letting non-citizens vote in Washington, D.C. or New York, or outright, as many people are pointing out, censorship due to people filing false privacy claims or legal challenges, exploiting the system to gain some kind of political power, and I can respect that. So at that point, I'm just like, yeah, I'm genuinely freaked out. Not to mention, you know what really does it is like we can have drama and whatever, and I'm kind of like, whatever. And then I see these two Republicans in Jersey get killed, and I'm kind of like, okay, guys, let's get serious. Let's get serious.
We're lucky to be able to experience drama in a conversational way. We're very privileged in this society to be able to hash it out with words before it would ever come to anything other than that.
We can. You know, I put it this way. You mentioned it allows you to see who you might not want to work with and who you want to work with. We can see the camps, right? The audience sizes here and a different audience here, and there's some overlap, and some people get mad this way and some people get mad that way. And I'm just like, but why are we mad at each other? I shouldn't be doing that, because the people over there are doing really messed up stuff. They're lying to the American people. They're spreading false intelligence. They're putting ankle weights on a president who gave us the best economic numbers in a generation, and then resulted in us getting a Joe Biden who gives us some of the worst. And I'm kind of like, yeah, I think we've got to make sure we're focused on that stuff.
You know, I was thinking, well, you go for it, Rita.
You triggered him with the Trump economics.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, that's part. I do have to address that. I mean, we were definitely, when Trump ran for president in 2016, he even said, we're living in a bubble. It's going to pop. This isn't actually a good economy. Until he was president, then suddenly it was the greatest economy in the world until it crashed when he's gone. You know, I don't think that has much to do with Trump or Biden or Obama. It's more about the Federal Reserve policies we had over that time. But that aside, sure. I think it's important. I think the fox in the hen, or the wolf in sheep's clothing is more dangerous than the fox in the hen house. So like an obvious enemy is less of a threat because it's easy to point out. It's easy to say this person is dangerous and they're against what we stand for. When you have somebody, I would say like Trump, who virtue signals on a lot of important issues, but then 9 times out of 10, when it comes down to it, he goes along with whatever the establishment wants. I think that's more dangerous. I mean, under Biden, you've had legitimate right-wing opposition to what he's been doing. If Trump were still president right now, I don't think you'd have nearly the amount of solidified opposition to what's going on in the White House. I mean, because we saw that in 2020.
But when you look at wages and inflation, right when Joe Biden gets inaugurated, then right after he enacts a plethora of executive orders, you start to see a dramatic shift in wages starting to go down, and inflation starting to go up. So you think that was a coincidence?
No, I don't think it's a coincidence. I mean, the CARES Act was the largest spending bill in U.S. history, signed by Donald Trump in March of 2020. The COVID Relief Act of 2020 was the second largest spending bill signed into law by President Trump in December of 2020. And so sure, Biden's energy policy does nothing to help. It definitely makes it worse. But to act like printing trillions and trillions of dollars out of midair when we had a Republican president and locking the economy down, which wasn't his fault. I'm not blaming him. I mean,
it was Democrat governors.
Sure. Well, Republican governors too. It was both. Yeah. But to act like that wouldn't have, effects regardless of whether or not he gets elected. Like even if Donald Trump got reelected and was still president, you would have 95% of this inflation. The inflation is increasing the money supply. I mean,
I agree to the extent that the spending was bad, but also you take a look at for one, like obviously the energy policy of Joe Biden, but you take a look at a whole bunch of other things. I mean, they're enacting policy based on ideological ends. Joe Biden literally said he was going to end fossil fuels. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Before the pandemic, the economy was the best numbers of our lives, obviously not during the pandemic. So if you get a knee-jerk reaction that results in mass spending and panic, but you have a tendency among Democrats for harsh and total lockdown, you get a Joe Biden who starts speaking about the lockdowns only to blue states and not red states. And then, previous to this, you had some red states saying no and opening back up. You get a Joe Biden that comes into office, enacts a bunch of policies. You get the Inflation Reduction Act, quote unquote, and then you watch in real time as inflation continually gets worse, stagnates at extremely high levels, or continues to get worse. Yeah, I think if Donald Trump was president, we'd probably have better economic policy. I think things would probably be recovering.
Well, you got a DeSantis because you had Biden. I don't think you would have had a DeSantis under Trump. DeSantis, and I've got lots of issues with DeSantis, but when he was opposing the COVID regime in Florida, where Jose is living, I think a lot of that was because there was political will to have a dissenter to the official narrative that Joe Biden was putting out. With Donald Trump, I think that would have been a lot less likely. I think if you have a central authority figure that people can hate and they can actually oppose, not just like in a virtue signaling way and not just in an emotional way, but actually come out against it. That's how you get an actual...
I think a good example of what Reed's getting at is just a quick little thing. The majority of gun control gets pushed through under Republican presidents. And the reason why is because of exactly what he's saying. When you have someone like a Biden in office, you actually get a legitimate Republican pushback. Whereas you have somebody like a conservative in office, they're able to push through these huge bills or these things that would typically be not conservative because no one wants to rock the boat.
I just want to clarify that if I had to compare Joe Biden with Donald Trump, I do prefer Donald Trump's policies to Joe Biden. I'm just talking from a reactionary perspective.
You're coming at it from a libertarian's perspective.
Sure.
So the underlying statement that you're making is Donald Trump is not a libertarian, which I don't think anyone...
He's not even a Republican.
Well, I mean, he's a progressive Republican, probably along
he's
the lines
He's a 90s
of like
Democrat.
That's fair and that's fine. But if you're arguing that Donald Trump is not libertarian enough for you, that's a legitimate argument because Donald Trump wasn't trying to be libertarian.
Well,
it's fair to say that Donald Trump isn't libertarian enough for libertarian people, and I mean most of your criticisms I agree because I think I prefer a smaller government, but holding Donald Trump to the libertarian standard and saying, well, he's not a libertarian, when everybody that's a Donald Trump supporter is going to go, duh, we don't care.
I don't think that's
what I mean.
That's not my argument.
My argument, interplay between the different parties.
My argument is actually to achieve libertarian policies is easier on a state level under Joe Biden than it would be under Donald Trump because it's easier to rally opposition to Joe Biden. Like stuff that's happened in Florida, stuff that's happened in New Hampshire. It's very easy because it's easy to rile up your right-wing neighbor and say, do you want Joe Biden to be able to have federal jurisdiction over what happens in New Hampshire? And they'll say, hell no.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.